Right. So everybody, thanks so much for listening to Fire Breathing Rob. If you're listening to us, please subscribe, like, and share these interviews. We have a guest on here who's been on here twice. This is his third time, and a lot of people give him high ratings. So we're gonna keep bringing him back if they do that. So I think he's got a lot of interesting knowledge and topics, being in the real estate business, whether it was commercial real estate or housing in general. And we have a lot of things that are really coming around in full circle right now in our economy right now, due to COVID, due to issues even before COVID even started, through our lawmakers and our economy in general. This is Darius Ross. Darius, thanks so much for coming on here and all the time. I really enjoy this, and the people love you.
My pleasure. Got to keep the fans going.
As far as housing goes, we have saw that housing has gone down. I remember, I think after we talked, maybe a couple of days after we talked last, Darius, housing in Orlando went down 5 to 10%. So it's slowly trickling down again, and I laugh because I told you all these guys that I know, I got to buy a house. I got to buy it now. I got to, this person's bidding. It's a cash bid. I don't know what to do and stuff. And I'm telling them, take it easy, man. Take it easy. Give it a little bit of time. Why do you got to buy it this second? Well, what are you going to drop dead tomorrow? You're going to buy. Anyways, so with that said, and obviously the moratorium is done. It's kaput. Any new opinions as far as housing goes? Are you seeing any new trend lines?
I was in Pennsylvania over the weekend.
Right.
And at 3 different hotels, I'll tell you what I saw that gives me an idea of how bad this is going to be. The homeless population at the hotel. I'm seeing Mercedes-Benz, I'm seeing BMWs, I'm seeing luxury cars with people having everything in their cars inside that would have been in their houses inside their cars. I'm seeing them walk into the hotel with vouchers. I'm seeing them walk in there with kids. I'm seeing people that are living now in the hotel. So the reality of it is it's starting to hit. And how bad is it going to get? I witnessed an example of how bad it's going to be getting because I'm looking at $40,000 to $70,000, $100,000 car sitting outside with all your stuff in it. So that tells me now, in that area, it's shock time. So as I've said all the time, it's going to get terrible.
So why is it that these cars need to be repossessed? Is that why? Because, I'm thinking unless you're leased it, obviously, if you lease in the car, it's a totally different story. But if you own these cars, 70 grand, 80 grand, and you don't have basically a pot to pee in right now, why would you not sell that car? Maybe get a cheap, small car. I know used cars are really tough to get right now, but if you could get a cheaper car and use that money for whatever essentials you need.
Because remember this thing called stimulus money.
Yeah.
There was a sign that I saw in a building in New York, and it said President Biden, and they were they were using the F word, saying help's not coming. So people are now still thinking that help's coming. So they're still thinking that the stimulus is going to continue no matter how bad things are getting. Unfortunately speaking, Mr. Biden can't do anything because his hands are now tied. And now we're at a state where these people are not going to get rid of those cars because that's their only transportation. The banks aren't taking the cars back because the banks are in a position where if they start taking the cars back, the bank's going to be a car lot. So basically it's a catch-22. When they take all the houses back, then they got to fall behind the cars and they got to fall behind the credit cards. And as you see with Wells Fargo with the credit lines, we have a nightmare coming.
So I know you spoke about the interest rate going higher. When you said 2022, we saw that Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, came out and he said this year interest rates are going to go up twice. So, when he says twice, I know you're not in the room, but you follow these trends. What are going to be the trends as far as twice go?
I would say you can look for interest rates probably by the middle of next year to be somewhere around 6 or 7%.
Wow.
And that's going to be a shocker for a lot of people because right now, tapering around the world is beginning to happen. You're seeing it in Europe, you're seeing it in Japan, you're seeing it in other parts of the world. Those Federal Reserves in those particular countries are now tapering back. So they're actually pulling money out of the system. So it's just a question of when the US starts tapering back fully. The Fed's starting a little bit now, but they're going to go full steam.
Do you feel like this is kind of the Biden administration is going to become a rerun of the Clinton administration with the, obviously the Republicans take over in 2022. They come in with that balanced budget stuff and there's a fight back and forth. Biden plays this bipartisan deal and they come to some sort of agreement on that. Do you feel like those years are coming back as far as the 1990s in this country?
I would say more like the Reagan years,
okay,
which is going to be far more radical, because at the end of the day, you're looking at now, once the Republicans take control, they're going to stop everything that has been Democratic. And that's going to be the catalyst for the ignition that will ignite the financial crisis. Let me go back to something I said in one of the previous podcasts here. See, the way the country works and the way the world works, you're going to have a series of different events, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a health crisis, which is what we've had, you're going to have an employment crisis. Behind the employment crisis, you're going to have a sovereign debt crisis. And then you have the financial crisis. And then there's the recovery. Well, right now, we've passed the employment, we've passed the health crisis. We're now in the financial crisis next, or sovereign debt, take your pick. But irregardless, this is where the biggest haircut takes place at. So we can look at now, there's going to be major, major casualties in business, economics, and so forth, not to mention the trade situation. There are trades and shipping situations in China that we have a supply logistics problem. Supplies aren't getting to the States. You can go on the shelves now and you're seeing the shelves are empty because of what happened during the Trump administration with the tariffs.
Well, I got to tell you this. I just went to Staples to look for a new printer. And the woman said, and these are the cheaper printers because you just get a cheaper printer. Regardless, she said, oh, a lot of these printers, she said, we don't really have in stock. And I said, oh, why is that? Just because they're cheaper, people are buying them? She said, no, because the chips. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, I heard a lot about that with the cars and the semiconductors and stuff. And I know they passed the bill on that in Congress, but it wasn't nearly enough as, what they need in this country. So my thing is, with this is, if you have money in the bank, though, say you have no debt right now, you got money in the bank. If this goes up 6-7%, should you be there at 7 a.m. waiting outside that bank to cash in on this, or what?
You should be thinking very wisely about the moves you're going to make, because if the interest rates go to where they should go to correct this whole problem, we're looking at interest rates probably exceeding 12 to 14%. In reality, in order for things to get back in balance again.
So if you got money in that bank, in a regular bank, you're looking at CDs or, just regular bank accounts, I mean, what the rates are right now. It's pretty much
0.0001.
Yeah, it's pretty much zero in plain English. And if you could get even close to maybe, 0.05 or something like that, or 7 or 9, you're in real good shape. But regardless of that, if you got that money, then you're saying you should be in line then and be ready to rock and roll when that happens then.
Either one or two things. Either you're going to be in a position where you're going to take that money and get into some strategic investments and be looking at the market as the stocks start dwindling down and then the correction starts taking place, because there's going to be correction. I can guarantee you the market will end up somewhere around between 3,000 and 8,000 points, probably 5,000 is the middle point. So if you're smart, you're going to be looking at how to take advantage of those stocks that are going down. On the other hand, investments, you want to start looking at solid assets, gold, silver, etc. That's always going to be there. But more importantly speaking, assets that have, as we call it, they're not making any more ground. So focusing on those things.
So with the correction, then you should be thinking about within the next 8 months to get out of the stock market then. Is that what you're saying?
I would not want to be in the stock market between 2022, mid 2022. And I'm stretching that out even. I would start leaving the market sometime in the latter part of, this quarter. But I definitely wouldn't want to be there in 2022 through 2024. Definitely not.
I still don't agree with you about the Kamala Harris thing. By the way, if you've listened to a couple of our podcasts, Darius is predicting that Kamala Harris is going to be the next president of the United States after Biden. I do agree that Biden looks like he's, slowing down, and it might not be because, what people say about his mental capacity. I think it's just because with all this crap going on between COVID, a financial crisis, and all these other things, homelessness, healthcare, I think he's kind of burned out.
It's a stressful job.
As a guy that's 78 years old, I think somebody that's 46, 47 might be
That's right.
pretty stressed out dealing with all this crap. So
here's the thing, though, to kind of give you an idea about that, right? We'll throw a curveball in there. Her presidency will be indifferent than any other presidency that you've seen in modern times. Because, as I just mentioned earlier, no presidency has ever dealt with all four things at the same time. Yeah. The economic, the sovereignty, the employment, as well as a global crisis in health and everything else. So FDR had the economic crisis, which was his major thing. Reagan had an economic crisis. Clinton still had an economic crisis. Bush had war and so forth. But no president has actually had to deal with all four at the same time. And on her watch, she will deal with all four: employment, economics, sovereign debt, as well as the financial.
Well, no one knows what her mindset is, because we talked about this last time. She is a flip-flopper. She said she was for Medicare for all. Then she said she was against it. She's the cop. No one knows what she's really for and against right now. So with all these crises and she reminds me of a Hillary Clinton Democrat as far as that goes, with that pragmatic progressive. So with that said, she is a queen of Wall Street too, just like Hillary Clinton was.
Exactly.
So my question is, with people living on the streets in the millions of tens of millions, and people with no money, people with no houses, in general, no health care, and we don't know what's going to be going on with a pandemic during this time. It could be still hypothetically going on. It still is right now. What happens there? I mean, I guess I'm asking you to predict the future, which isn't, the best question.
We can do that. We can play that one, though. Okay. Here's a way to play that now. That would guarantee her 3 terms.
3 terms.
Never been done before, right?
Well, FDR was.
Right,
yeah,
outside FDR.
Yeah.
But this would be another remake of that. Because if she could turn around and create a new deal,
right,
this would be it. Because everything is in place for the ultimate new deal. Mr. Biden doesn't have the ability to do it right now, because all the other pieces haven't fallen into place yet. But on her watch, it would fall into place.
So let's go into that then. So if she does that and does create a new deal, I'll be for her 100%.
Okay.
I don't think she's that type of Democrat. Although I'll tell you what, FDR was not that type of Democrat until, because he was a Wall Street guy, until he said, hey, guys, we're either going to do something, or these people are going to come for our houses. They're going to come and come right after us in plain English. So that's when he kind of put it in motion and said, we're going to get something done here. Otherwise, and a lot of those guys, fell down on the sword and came with him with that. So you're predicting that she may do that. Does she have the power to do that?
That's the key point there. She has the same track record of Mr. Obama.
Right.
It's almost the same type of thing. And if she plays her cards right, that's why I'm predicting. Everybody's saying, hey, are you sure? I'm like, absolutely. Because she's got the same dynamics going. And what this country will need at that time will be somebody that will understand the dynamics of it. Okay, you have the AOC on one side. You have on the other side, you may have a Ted Cruz, whatever else. But if these people are looking at a nightmare, a country under siege and under crisis, one of the greatest things that comes of that is either a later, if you want to call it a leader that becomes a tyrant, or a leader that becomes a great leader. So if she plays the situation right, she could become one of the greatest, as they say, American icons of political history. But the timing will be right for her. It's like you kind of walk into the situation and your timing, precision, and synchronicity was right.
Does she want to be the female FDR? And as the first woman president, does she have that ego to say, I want to be the best leader in American history and show off all these men and really, put it up and I want to be on Mount Rushmore. I want to be that person. That's the question. We don't know if she has that or not.
She could pull it off and still please Wall Street. Because theoretically speaking, the bottom line of Wall Street is either jobs or wealth creation. So now Wall Street's going to have to tap her back, or taper back, if you want to put it, their movements. Greed's going to have to be good, but greed good is going to have to take a step back for a little while for this whole thing to get fixed. Because here's what has to happen. The economics of this country are now 90% or 95% to the extremities where there's inequality in wealth. So now as a super wealthy person, we have to look at the situation and say, okay, if everybody has all the money at the very top and the folks down at the bottom are disgruntled, I can't play this program out correctly, because you can't rule the world if you don't have any subjects. So now what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to take a step back and say, you know what? They're going to have to use the model of the Fort Detroit model, whereas he knew that he was getting all the money in from Detroit because he owned the town. So Wall Street's going to have to realize you own everything. So now start giving it back and be patient about how this works. You still have control of everything, but let these people at least feel comfortable in the sense that they're getting something out of the deal. You can't take everything out now, raise the prices, and then screw them around. They're going to have to start pulling back and start easing up the reins of constraints. This is where she becomes a powerful politician at, when she says, listen, like what happened in New York during the 70s. New York was a place where there was a nightmare. Yeah. But Felix Rothschild and the Rockefellers and so forth sat down and said, listen, we need to phase back. They rebuilt New York, recreated the same thing there. She's going to have to do the same thing in America and say to the wealthy, you can still be greedy, but you have to be greedy with a conscience. That's the problem.
These companies don't really care about raising wages. They want to be on the right side of they want to be on the woke side, I should say. These companies want to be on the woke side. Black Lives Matter, gay and trans rights. I'm all for all this stuff too. But I'm also for, if you really want to help black and brown and poor white people, you raise the wage to over $15. It really should be like $23 an hour. Mm-hmm. If you look at the inflation rate from, last time we raised the minimum wage was when George Bush was in office. I believe it was in 2008. That's a long time ago. So a lot of these people, and I laugh too, and I want to get your take now. I laugh too when a lot of my Republican friends say, well, it's a minimum wage job. That's a kid's job. Not true, because a lot of these people that are in inner cities that are going into public school, they don't get good opportunities when they get out of school. A lot of them can't afford college. A lot of them are working through college. Or they could be 30 years old, 40 years old, and they're taking college courses on the side. So that's not really a great argument to go at. But go into that. Do you believe that too, that they're just on the side of the woke politics? They don't really care about raising the minimum wage as far as these big name companies.
See, we have to look at what happened with the economics of corporations. Corporations now are being developed and controlled and designed by entrepreneurs. And these entrepreneurs are a different level of the entrepreneurs of the bygone days of the 50s, 60s, and even the early 1900s. Because those entrepreneurs at that time believed in providing an American wage, an American opportunity, and so forth. What you have now is you're becoming an entrepreneur for the sole purpose of you getting wealthy, which is nothing wrong with that. But the point of it is, if you're taking a team of people with you and only the top people on your team are getting wealthy, that's the problem, because the support staff are taking losses. Now, there's another side to that. Part of that side to that is that if I'm sitting in a situation and I'm buying this product, right? I'm buying Lucci, Gooey, whatever the case may be. I'm buying Amazon. Part of that problem is if I'm buying it, guess what? I'm supporting this economics. So therefore, if you stop buying it, I can't continue to get rich to that level.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, though, with Amazon, because it's crushing small businesses.
Absolutely.
It's crushing regular big name companies, it's that's why we're seeing, you talked about this in a previous podcast, that malls are totally shutting down. A lot of that is because of the coronavirus, but a lot of it's also because Amazon is crushing. And, through the coronavirus, people are just buying, and they still are just buying online. If you live in a small city in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and the only job there is working in an Amazon warehouse. That's why I laugh at these people. What are you going to tell these people? You get mad when they're on the government dole, but when they're working at Amazon for $15 an hour and they still can't make it, then you say, oh, it's a minimum wage job. It's a kid's job. So what the hell do you want them to do? It's a
That's
joke.
part of the problem.
It's a
That's
scam.
part of the problem. That's it. That's part of the problem, because if you're going to say that the governmental assistance or the safety net programs should be eliminated, then you're going to have to say that the people that actually provide the jobs are going to be the entrepreneurs that are going to be focused on getting wealthy. Because here's the thing, if I invent an app and my app is going to make me a lot of money, if I have so many people out here that have the same skill set that I have to pay them very minimal to get that skill set out of them because they need a job, I'm going to do that more than likely. So as a result, that's the thing that has to be understood. The skill set is such that now you have so many people that have the same set of skills, it's a bidding war. I can get your skills for the minimum amount of money. And that's why Fiverr and Upwork and so forth are doing so well. I've used them numerous times to get, graphic work, artwork, and all other kind of things done, because again, people want to make money, and this frees them to make money. But what they don't have health insurance. They don't have this, they don't have the other. So again, if you're going to turn around and call out the safety net programs, you have to realize the reason why Mr. Bezos and other entrepreneurs can function is because of the fact they're taking advantage of supply and demand. People want the supply, they demand it. So therefore, they're using the supply and demand concept also in employment. I can get cheap labor, I'm going to use it. It's the same thing that happened when they went overseas.
So let's end this topic on that. What is there to do? Because like you said, there's not a lot of union jobs, anywhere. There's select few in select states. Most of these states in the country are right to work. For the union jobs that are around now, most of the unions aren't as strong as they used to be in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So how do we get the power back when you go into, and I believe this all goes back to money in politics in general, but you can talk about that in just a second, because my thing is, how do you get the power back when all these Republicans and Democrats are sold out to Jeff Bezos, are sold out to Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, all the big wigs on Wall Street? But they're not going to do shit for the people. Like you said, they're just trying to enrich their own pockets. So, I go back to Bernie Sanders, said he used to call and say, we need a revolution. Do we need a revolution? How do we gain the power back? If not, with, with these, these government players, as far as senators and House members, are sold out to the big money interests.
You have to ask yourself the following statement. At some point in time, there's going to have to be a cap on pricing. I bought a pack of Starburst, the same Starburst pack that's 99 cents. I went to a Dwayne Reed, came out, it was $2.79. When I came out of the store with the receipt, it was $3.26. Okay? Excuse me. So that gives you an idea of how the prices have gotten outrageous. 99 cents from 10 years ago, the same 16 Starbursts in the pack, 16 now. And they're going for what? 80 cents a piece? This is the reality to it. So what we're gonna have to look at now is some type of price ceiling. There's gonna have to be a price ceiling on rent, a price ceiling on your average commodities, a price ceiling on foods and so forth. So you're gonna lose the independency of things, because we're gonna ultimately end up in a price ceiling where there's either going to be prices off the Richter scale and nobody's buying, or you're going to have prices that come to a point where they're either going to be controlled, governmental control, which people don't want, or people are going to be buying. It's one or the other.
Sorry to interrupt you, Darius. I'm told that the inflation rate right now is not really high. It's only high on certain things. This is according to the Biden administration. Jen Psaki came out with I think his name is Brian Dees. He's the one of Biden's aides. But he came out and said that, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, Brian Dees came out and said that it's not really inflation. The inflation has come up because of poultry prices, beef prices, and used cars. And I believe it was one more item. Do you agree with that? Or is that kind of not really that true? It's true, but it's not. It's in the middle.
It's a good talking point, right? But see, I go back to a couple of different generations at 56. The White Castle's hamburger was 10 cents. It's now $3. The McDonald's meal was at one point in time $1.99. It's It's now $15, $20. The average meal that you go out for a family of 4, you could feed a family of 4 for $20. It's now $100. That's not inflation. That's greed.
Right.
Pure and simple. You know, when you look at the concept of employees that are only getting minimum wage, but in the same token, those same employees are seeing their executives getting buybacks and so forth in the hundreds of millions of dollars, that's not price changing. That's greed. If you see a bag of potato chips that used to be filled to here and now it's down here, that's nothing more than you're figuring out a way to blow the bag up with paper and charge more of the pricing. It's greed.
So was 2008 a fake revolution with Obama? Obama come in there and he says he's going to get universal health care, came in there, he was going to do everything in the kitchen sink. Everybody was chanting Obama, Obama, and I was one of those people.
Here's the problem with that whole process, and even with all due respect to Mr. Obama, the thing about that is, and people don't really understand that with politics, once you get elected, and I worked in government relations in a bank, so I can tell you the backdrop to this. Once you get elected, the game changes. You might say a lot of things on the election route, on the circuit, and on the catwalk, but once you get into that office and your first series of meetings are with the powers to be, those political lobbyists, those political action groups, and the people that actually give you the money to run.
Well, Bank of America was the one that filled up his cabinet. Wells Fargo,
right.
Bank of America,
That's
Chase, you know.
So you're going to do what you have to do in the best interest of your interests, we'll say, because you're not going to turn around and go out and say and do policies that are going to be contrary to what is going to keep you out of office. That's just real. Okay. So people don't really get that and understand that, okay, a politician is just that. He's campaigning every 2 years. And that campaign has to be funded and financed. And America's people giving $4 or $5 are not going to keep him in office. I'm sorry. Those $100,000 political action groups, those bundlers and so forth, those are the players.
Yeah, but hold on. I got to disagree with you a little bit there. Because when Bernie Sanders ran, he didn't get all those big money dollars. That's for damn sure. Those people freaking hate Bernie Sanders. Now, we know he didn't win. And I know that he had, you know, God and every demon in hell against him that was working against him. And everybody in the Democratic Party in the kitchen sink was working against him. But he did a pretty damn good job, especially even more so in 2016. So I got to disagree with if a guy that's 78-year-old white Jewish guy can attract, you know, white, black, Hispanic, Native American, young people, old, rich, poor people to his campaign, you know, there's a way. You know, it might be not a way, you know, it might be a tough road like Bernie saw. It was a tough road. I do think Bernie made a lot of mistakes, especially in 2020, you know, against Joe Biden, where he didn't go out and attack Joe Biden. He was incredibly weak on Joe Biden, kept saying he was his friend. That was the thing that drove me nuts. You're running against somebody, you keep calling him, he's my friend. He's not your friend. This isn't a political game. This is a game. It's like a basketball game. It's like a football game. It's a game. You're trying to win. It's not my friend. If I'm out on the court or I'm out in the field against you, Darius, you know, we may be friends and buddy behind doors, but when you're against me, I want to beat your ass. I want to win the game, man. You know, and then he comes out. Yeah, but and then I'll give you some time. He came out and said that they asked him. They said, "Oh, you know, one of the debates." They said, "Oh, do you think Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump?" And he says, "Yes." You say no, and here's why. Because he doesn't believe in Medicare for all. I do. Medicare for all is going to do this, that, and the kitchen sink. You know, and that's why I believe he lost. You know, if I'm running against you. You say, do you think Darius is going to beat Donald Trump? I say, hell no. He's going to get his ass kicked. And here's why. You know, so that you can't win like that. You can't win playing patty cakes. You got to play dirty a little bit.
But see, that's part of the problem. It's like I said about Kamala. At the end of the day, you have to have that pit bull mentality, but you have to also have the sophistication of a preacher, the savoir-faire of Don Juan, and the allure of a guy that is actually mediagenic. And the bigger thing of it is having the fundraising skills of a true philanthropist. And the problem with it is that Mr. Sanders had the ideal things going for him, which was the popular people. But his problem was the money skills. It hasn't translated into the dollars and cents, because the people can get you to a certain point, but the dollars and cents got to get you over the hump. That's the key.
You know, what made you, why do you call yourself an FDR Republican? I've never heard of that before in my life.
Okay, I'll throw it at you. If you look at what the concept of the Republican Party was with the Nebraska and Kansas fight, how it actually began, because when we look at how the Republican Party began, it was based upon the abolishment of slavery, and because the Southerners wanted to make slavery an ongoing institution with that manifesto. So I'm going back to that era. So the Honest Abe era of the Republicans and what the Republican Party was, which was embraced by the Black community. So being from the South, you know, having relatives down there, that was the Republican Party. The Democratic, which is i.e. the Dixiecrats, hijacked the Republican Party during a time period of the late 60s and 50s when the Republican Party was actually going bankrupt. Now, I looked at myself as a Republican from the FDR standpoint, because FDR in a lot of ways was a businessman. So undercover, he was a Republican underneath it all, because he was basically financially so well off that that wasn't necessarily going to be a Democratic trait per se. We'll say it that way. And at the end of the day, the family was such that they were very involved in economics of business, right? So now that was the first thing. And then in the same tip, when I say, okay, I'm part of the Honest Abe principle, where you're looking at it like, okay, he believed in the things that principally made the fabric and the, you know, the structure of this country what it should be, right? And then in the Eisenhower perspective, I put the three of them together of, okay, there was a need for military when there was a need for military, and then there was a need for the military to step aside and be more traditional and more isolated. So I kind of look at all three of them as, you know, I would pattern myself as in that policy. And so that's kind of how it was and how I kind of view it, so to speak.
No, you're good. So my thing is, you're politically homeless then, correct?
It's like a merit of different things. You know, it's like I'm looking at all three of them as my role models in the political arena, because you would call homeless, that's a good way of looking at it, because you're looking at each one of them as, you know, where you can pull from their policies and their ideologies. Ike had an ideology of, after he became a military man, then he realized how World War II was so destructive. It destroyed, under the Marshall Plan, so much of the Europe. And FDR, he walked into a situation where he was a very wealthy man, but he also realized New York and the country was needing to make changes, okay? And Abraham Lincoln, during the middle of the Civil War and Reconstruction, he had to make things happen. So I look at each one of them as, okay, they were trying to make things happen under duress.
Yeah, but
so
I'm saying, like, now, Darius, you're like politically homeless. Like, I consider myself a progressive. I don't really consider myself really a Democrat. Like, even though I voted for Joe Biden, he was definitely not my first choice. Bernie Sanders was. And I don't really agree with Joe Biden's milquetoast policies. So I kind of consider myself a progressive that's kind of homeless right now, because I don't really see myself as a Democrat.
When you look at it from the perspective of how you're outlining it now, not a conservative. I'm definitely not neoconservative, probably not liberal at all, and definitely not on the left side of the Republican Party. And I think for me, what happened with Donald Trump and the entire Trump scenario was, unfortunately speaking, a complete travesty to the Republican Party, because all of a sudden we found ourselves as those old school Republicans. When I say old school, it wasn't a matter of the Republican Party being so radical. There's a radicalization, or if you want to call it the change of the party, happened so rapidly and in so many different ways. It's like, okay, we went from President Bush's administration of what the Republicans were then to now it's like, okay, you don't even recognize what's going on here. So agree, homeless, absolutely, because you don't fit the role of anything that you know now. It doesn't make any sense. Okay,
so I want to end on this and talk about this, why we got Trump. Personally, I believe Donald Trump came into power because of everything we've just spoken about. You know, there's no good jobs. Healthcare sucks. You know, and Donald Trump played on, you lost your job, it's because of the immigrants. You lost your jobs, it's because of the trade deal. You lost your jobs because of the black guy, the Hispanic guy. Pit people against each other.
Mhm.
and then let them fight with each other. And then I can give my friends tax cuts
Mhm.
like I did in 2017. I can
Agreed.
put, I can say that we're going to end the wars and not, and
Mhm.
just play to the base. And I can say in the old times, we used to beat the crap out of it, and everybody gets pumped up and
That's right.
loves it because I
Mhm.
know how to work the TV. I know how to get
Mhm.
free media. So the people that voted for Donald Trump, some of them were racist, anti-Semitic, and
Mhm.
misogynist. A lot of them were pissed off because they lost their jobs, because they can't
That's
feed their
right.
family,
That's right.
because they voted Democrat half their life. And the
Mhm.
Democrats didn't do diddly squat.
Donald Trump fed America to become a pit bull being fed gunpowder. So you said red meat, I'm saying gunpowder. And of course, anybody that knows anything about fighting dogs, when that dog is fed gunpowder, automatically is going to trigger something. So America started seeing all the things that were going to bring decisiveness and dividedness about. Now, that started out based upon lack of employment, as you said, lack of health care, the lack of education,
Yeah.
the lack of all these things. It was just a big lack of. Now, what fed it was the ability to keep on fanning it because situations were kept occurring that allowed for it to keep rolling along. Now, the problem with it is when you say about how I'm looking at it from a political basis, my policy thought pattern is in order for this thing to get back to normal, whether it's Mr. Biden, whether it's Kamala or Mr. DeSantis, the bottom line of it is you're going to have to create a situation where a politician has to understand not only Washington's working wheels, but understand Wall Street's grease that it actually brings to the table. But then another further ingredient is going to be understanding the people and the fact that people are tired. They're broke, they're frustrated, they've seen their lives change, and now what they're looking for is a savior. So as you said about the fascist situation, Adolf Hitler did not come about based upon the country being at its greatest height. He came about because at the end of the day, there were people that were going through the utmost of extremities at that time. Same thing that starts happening in America if we're not careful. The rising of these leaders comes from the situations that's happening in those countries that effectively speaking feeds a certain type of animosity, which then feeds a certain type of politician, which ultimately feeds the state of the country. So what needs to happen here, a politician has to be very smart about how he's going to play this game to meet all interests. All needs have to be met. So this table has to be full of all interest needs met, but each person has to walk away with at least a third of what they need. America's citizens need jobs, unemployment, as they say, needs to go away. Education needs to be, somehow or another restructured. The healthcare system needs to have something like Canada, where it's a universal healthcare. We need that because so many people now will be suffering after COVID, after what happened with 9/11, after all these crises that are happening with hurricanes and everything else. These things are feeding into healthcare. The unemployment issue / employment. We already have a problem with employment. We have companies that are basically not going to pay the wages. We already know that. Okay, that's a given. So what we need to do then is allow for entrepreneurs to have a venture capital fund to allow for more small businesses to begin to flourish. And that needs to be a given. And then the revamping of the educational system. So we have a lot of work to be done here. But the biggest problem then becomes that process of the transportation system. That transportation system needs to be done. And that bill, when you said 6 trillion, no, it's closer to about 20 or 30 trillion, because there's so many things that need to be dealt with: bridges, roads, construction, and everything else, but also housing. There's a huge problem in housing. People can't afford it. So again, we have so many problems here that a leader needs to turn around and start looking at and start thinking about what's my next move. All interests have to be met, including Wall Street and including the people.
Darius Ross again here on Fire Breathing Rob. Darius, where can people find more about you?
They can go to dariusaross.com and enjoy some of the things that I have going on there.